All right, everyone, welcome to In the Shed.live. We've got Giveton Gelin and Peter
You ready?
Tijerina here talking about open discourse about the lingering effect in music in relation to time. Hope you guys enjoy.
Are you ready, Cam? Hey, welcome to In the Shed. It's my great pleasure to invite Peter Tijerina. Is that how we say it?
Yeah, pretty close.
I'm so sorry, man. Tijerina.
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 Hey, perfect.
Yes. I gotta make sure I get that right. And so, man, literally, I've been sharing these videos about the lingering effect, and you made a comment on one of my posts, and it was really interesting. And I thought that, oh man, this is someone I'd like to pick as someone I'd like to talk to about this, because obviously I'm into this kind of stuff, and I think it's good for us to know a little bit about what's really going on and to figure out why do we feel the way we feel when we hear music. And you made a lot of interesting points. So I just want to start off, even before we get into that, can you talk a little bit about yourself? What do you do? And etc.
Yeah. So Peter Tijerina. I'm originally from San Antonio, Texas, which is basically South Texas. It used to be Mexico way back when, before like the battles down there in the war. So, and then when I was 12, I moved up to Washington State, and that's where I started being exposed to a little jazz. Then ended up finishing my undergrad in the state, going to Michigan State. So they got a good jazz program over there. And then finishing my doctorates here at University of Illinois, here still in the Midwest. So yeah, you see, I released an album. I think that was my pandemic project. I had recorded it years ago and finally pushed it out. But yeah, jazz trombone, classical in the beginning for many years. And as a quick side note, I know a lot of trombonists won't like this, but I'm more into trumpet than I am trombone. So like Wynton was my guy forever because he could do both classical and jazz. And when I first started undergrad, YouTube was just coming out and there wasn't much to look up. So I remember finding videos of like Wynton back in the 90s with his septet and different groups he was part of. And he was my role model for a good 10 years, probably in a lot of ways. Charisma, his philosophies about music, and his playing, of course. And my brother's a trumpeter, so whatever he listened to growing up, he's like 10 months younger than me. Whatever he listened to is what I listened to growing up, which was a lot of trumpet playing. So trumpets always running through here, the clarity, the sound, always about the sound, But, yeah. So that's a little bit about me. Oh, as a side note, I think this is important. I spent many years in a Pentecostal church in my teens, which I didn't think made an impact, but as I'm starting to do my research here about early jazz trombone, finding out it had a big impact on jazz. And when ragtime kind of made the full transition to what's known as early jazz now. So yeah.
Great stuff, man. Great stuff. And man, I love Wynton too, and he's a great role model for all of us in terms of musician and artist, etc. So I'm with you on that. And it's great. It's great to hear a little bit about your background. Yeah, man. Let's get into it, man. I think basically how it came about for me was if anything, I started thinking a little bit more about it because I guess there wasn't a lot of research done about it, but I mean, there is research now coming to find out, which I've been doing some homework, but I was just kind of thinking on the fact that how, like, when people play stuff, like, oh man, like how, like, it makes me feel a certain way, but for some reason it doesn't really leave my brain. Like it still kind of has an imprint. And I just kept thinking about that a lot. And when I started playing material and started thinking more about how great musicians solo and started thinking about how they're using it. And I think it's something that we naturally like think of. And I think people, when we talk about motivic development, like ideas like that, you see how it comes into play. And so it's always been something that's kind of been obvious, and I'm always the guy that like I always think that like I have this thing where I like to think where some of the best ideas are the ones that are the most obvious, right? I think the ones that are the most obvious and the ones that people or we have the reaction of like, oh, why did I not think of that? Like, you know, a
Mm-hmm.
long time ago. Like, you know, the ones that are the most useful, if you know, if that makes any sense, I find are the ones that are like, oh, I should have thought about that like ages ago, like, you know, kind of thing. But I try to then like think like that when it comes to music and how I find ideas that are useful to me now. And so it came to the point where I started thinking, okay, how can I make sense of this? And the only thing I could have thought of is like lingering, like, oh, this thing is lingering in my mind. You know, even after I hear a song as well, like this thing is just like my brain, like, you know, even though the notes are no longer here, but it's still present for some reason. And so I made a couple of videos, etc., and coming to find out a little bit about how that works and how the brain picks up music in the air. I just wanted to pick your brain about just on the lingering effect before we go to fourth dimension or anything like that. Like, what do you think about that, and like, how can we get more insight?
You know, it's funny, like as you were telling me about some of this stuff right now, or telling everybody about kind of what you've been exploring right now in terms of music, the simple things have been like they've been there this whole time, and then just like, oh duh, they're right there. It's one thing. So I'll get to the point, but I remember also in my 20s, I would just think a lot. Maybe who knows? In your 20s, you got all this energy, you're shedding, and if you're not shedding, your mind's just like going. And one thing I tried to do early on when I got to college, started studying on my own. There wasn't a jazz program. There was a couple of jazz bands, so I got to like be self-taught during that time, which
Mm.
has a great value. I found out later on, but so I started to think, okay, I miss like the hominess and like the more folk and tradition of like the Southwest where I was living in. All the music, I listened to a lot of Tejano music, norteño stuff. My dad listened to cumbias, and it has like a certain beat. And it's funny because at the time I didn't like country music. It was too country, like it was too corny. So got to Washington. They're studying all this like complex melodic minor substitutions, Locrian, sharp two, you know, all these. So it's like, how do I like mix these cool new sounds with like this like hominess and country home folkness? So I was trying to write tunes and practice. I don't know, just basically I started to. I'm still working on this, trying to combine the two aspects because like I think people at their core connect to like culture and togetherness and like which comes from a lot of like blues folk songs, you know, a lot of this, wherever that is around the world. And then as humans, we also have this like really smart intellectual brain that we want to develop. So just kind of over the years, I've been finding how to meet the two. Right now, I'm discovering my earlier past a little bit. The reason I'm getting into early jazz, not only to get into the roots of jazz, but finding out there's connections to my own music that I grew up with. Mexican music, basically, Mexican American music as well. And it has that for example, like the if you think about the two feel in jazz, cumbias have that, and it's not like perfectly straight. There's a little lilt and just kind of like breaking. And every region um, has their own version of what the groove feels like. It's not always even the eighth note. So that's one thing. Another thing is that the music I was into too, not even into, just exposed to as at an early age is it's more country than I thought. So it's funny. I started as I get older, I'm starting to accept more country music, more the early jazz stuff I thought was corny. Louis Armstrong, Jack Teagarden, Kid Ory, trombone players, and just learning more. You're just like filling in the gaps, so to speak, and learning more. Eventually, I do want to get more into like the Mexican music and all the influence with indigenous cultures, with African cultures. There is some of that in there, and yeah, if you ever study like jazz, early jazz, pre-jazz styles, it's all like mixed and intertwined, and even within New Orleans, I think each region has like its own style that, and it's spread all over the country. But so yeah, and it's sometimes like in terms of like the simple things, where you have a subject and you develop it, or themes and variations, sort of thing. It's something composers do all the time, and some of the best jazz musicians. I'll take like a little like diddly 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 boo, diddly 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 boo, diddly diddly diddly, and from there, like it's just like a simple thing I think your mind can grasp onto, and then just use that as a starting point, springboard off. So these two are related somehow. I don't know. So that's one starting point, I guess I have to say about your comment. I don't know if you have any questions. That was a lot of information.
Absolutely. No, that's a great point because, you know, musicians using time and creating narrative art is like a perfect example of how, this comes into effect, and how we use the fact that, we're working for a linear process, and how you can create, different material in one point of the one point of the process, and then create another material at another point in the process to then counter it, in a way. So I definitely love the direction. Do you have any more, or you want to expand on some more examples of how it's represented in music as well?
Yeah, you were talking about lingering effect. I remember not too long ago, checking out. I think I started from a video and I was looking into the effect, but and it's kind of related to the fourth mission too. About how what you do now will affect the different outcomes and possibilities later on down. So, I can talk more about this here in a little bit, but basically, in a nutshell, the fourth dimension includes time. So, if you think about, can I say this in a nutshell? Is that okay? Okay, so if you don't have any dimensions, you just have a single point in space, just like a dot, single point, and there's no direction for it. It doesn't go up, down, sideways, forwards, backwards. Then when you get to the first dimension, you have a line segment. So you got 2 points. So it's just one direction. Like if you think about left, which would be this way for you all. So that's the first dimension. Then second dimension, you should get not only length but also width. So you can draw a square. So you got two directions. You can go that way, that way. Third dimension, you add yet a new direction, and you get length, width, and height. You can think about a cube. We live, we perceive things in the third dimension. I believe this is how it goes. I don't know a ton about it, but you might want to talk to like a physicist or a mathematics person to get more detailed about this. But we live in a third dimension, but we can perceive it, but we can only see two-dimensional. Like we can't see 360, like all the way around something, right? So we just see lines and curves and flatness everywhere. Now, when you start to add, so that's basically space. Now you're taking up space. You add a fourth dimension, you start to add time. So if you think about a cube, I don't know, 5 years down the road, everything it did, all the events within that time that it did in that 5 years, that's all part of the fourth dimension. So that's where they have like a tesseract. That's a kind of shape, like a four-dimensional shape. So this little thing that I was thinking about from that phrase you just said about the philosophy of the group is that basically we can envision what we want in our goals and developments and music, career, life, etc., and start to take action now to affect the future. And essentially, now we're affecting the fourth dimension in terms of like how everything plays out, the output of everything. So my friend left me with this quote earlier, and he said, he's a mathematics major, and he was trying to be accurate with his words. He said, "Our actions are isolated in a single point in time, whereas music echoes throughout time and echoes throughout the fourth dimension. Music has the power of like, going beyond. I don't know like a ton beyond that. I know some like little elements within music, vibrations and different sound waves, etc. But Yeah, I just thought that was a pretty powerful statement, which I can share later. So
That's
that's
deep, bro. That's super deep.
it. Just like blows your mind. And I know if you're anything like me, like my especially like around 23, 24, this thing would not shut off. You're just kind of going deeper and deeper. I'm just like, we just go smaller and smaller and bigger and bigger. How big is this world and universe that we live in? And I mean, with everything, it doesn't have to be about the cosmos or anything, but yeah, it if you think about it, like what you do now, whatever it is, music related even, is going to affect the whole outcome. So you're affecting the fourth dimension and the different possibilities. As you start to get basically to higher dimensions, every new dimension is a new possibility, a new direction, which is hard to imagine. But I think by the time you get to the 11th dimension, it ends right around there, 11, 12 with like string theory. You get to the point where like every possible outcome has been worked out and all goes to a single point. So it's just like about all the possible outcomes. It just, yeah, it gets deeper and deeper and deeper until I guess it kind of goes back to the beginning. I don't know. That's the impression I got. It's just like, and we're just here in this little space and time, living in a 3D world, but only perceiving, you know, two
Dimension.
dimensions. So
Right.
yeah, it gets
We're
crazy.
in, we're in the third dimension, but we're only able to experience two-dimensional things.
Yes, there you go. And then, yeah, with the perceive thing, I think we can imagine a fourth dimension, but we cannot perceive it. We can start to take actions to affect it, but we can't perceive. We don't know what the end result is going to be of the different actions we've taken. So, but the music part of it, it's like, how does it like supersede like all the dimensions and kind of get through all of them? I don't know. It's interesting. So I'll talk to my friend about that more.
So I like what you just said. Like we can influence the fourth dimension, but we can't perceive it all as one.
Yep.
Right? That's a beautiful saying, man. Because if I'm looking at my notes right now, so you guys are not gonna see me in a sec, but I'm gonna keep my audio on, right? And in my notes here, I have something where it talks about, right? It talks about like there's an aspect called echoic memory, which refers to like a period of time after the sound stops when
Right.
it can still be received in the mind's ear. So like this allows for a kind of overlap between the past and present in our perception of music. So like when you said something about the echo earlier, like that's something that's also interesting too. If like, can you expand on that as well?
Yeah. What exactly can you
Just like the fact that like there's some element of
music?
music, and also the fact that when we do hear something and when we stop hearing it, there's still some level of if I can look back at my notes, it's talking about echoic memory. I think that's what it's a brief period of time. It's very brief, but it's a brief period of time after the sound stops when it can still be perceived in the mind's ear.
Interesting. I don't know too much about that. It sounds like we're getting into like auditory kind of stuff with hearing, maybe speech, and not speech pathology, but having to do with the brain. But yeah, that got me interested in like eidetic memory stuff like that, like photographic memories and remembering sound, or just maybe you can like replay your whole day, for example. Some people,
Mm.
I think children, a lot of children have that, but as we get older, we lose it. I wonder if it's related to like losing kind of like the curiosity we have about everything in this world and in life, and just getting more serious and responsible and adults. But yeah, I don't know how the two would be related. They seem kind of, I'm sure they are, but I can't make a precise statement on that. So that's
Oh
just,
no, man, I'm just this is all that's a conversation where we kind of just like rebound and throw back thoughts about just this topic, man. Uh, if anything, uh, how about we just expand a little bit more on the fourth dimension? Is there any more interesting things that we can talk about? Because man, what you just shared with us in terms of, I find that like I'm content with being able to influence the fourth dimension. Like you know what I mean? Like being in the third
Right.
dimension, like I'm like that to me is like it's just like I'm like I'm good with that because whatever the outcome is, cool. But at least I had something to do with it. You know, at least I can be intentional with that, right?
Right. So yeah, I put a couple of notes here about how it could be related to other things. But I remember one thing also when I was like getting into this maybe 10 years ago. I'm in my 30s now. And yeah, mid early 20s. Another thing I don't know if I was reading a Brian Greene book or where I got this information from, but I put here that I've read that it at its core, the universe, like at its core in terms of like atoms and even subatomic particles, even smaller than atoms. At the core of the universe is made up of energy and vibrations. This guy was like a string theory expert. And if you kind of think about musical vibrations, sound waves, different kinds of waves, even transverse waves, etc. You get like there's light waves, there's sound waves, seismic waves from earthquakes, ripples in water, those are kinds of waves, and they kind of the motion that they affect. There's different types. They're categorized into different types, but that kind of was interesting to think about. What was it? Right. Okay, so that's more in terms of vibrations. They talk about little vibrating strings and string theory at the very smallest possible thing that we've ran into. I don't know how small or it could get, but mathematics show a limit. Last I read about this. So and then also like gravity can distort space and time too. If you've looked into that. So right now, what even the Earth, right? The reason we're on here is there's a certain amount of gravity. Not only can it distort space, but it can like pull us. It'll like space can actually bend if you get strong enough. Like for a black hole, for example, some of the strongest gravity out there in the universe that we know of. It can also distort time. So, have y'all ever seen the movie Interstellar?
Yes.
I heard like scientifically, it was more accurate than a lot of other movies out there. I'm sure there was a couple of things that were off, but as they got closer to like the black hole or whatever planet they were on, their sense of reality, it just seemed like they were fine. Like they were actually slowed down relative to back home on Earth. So by the time they got out of there, even though it was like minutes or hours, however long it was, like the astronaut's like daughter was already older than him. Just like flip, like gravity can do that too. So I don't know how this is exactly related, but I thought that was pretty cool.
Mm.
And then if you get into different waves, you have like transverse waves, vibrations waves, which is like water ripples, light and radio waves, which is I think are called electromagnetic waves. Seismic waves I mentioned earlier, waves on a string, like if you were to like stretch a string and pluck it, those are all transverse waves. Then the other kind is longitudinal waves. So transverse waves, if you have any kind of thing like that, move it and it kind of starts to create waves. That's what it is. So longitudinal waves is like it's like a slinky, for example. If you like do motion, it'll kind of like go like this. Or if you line up a bunch of people and when somebody pushes the other person, they're all gonna kind of like do this and affect each other until the energy kind of leaves that whole medium conductor. So examples of longitudinal waves are like sound waves in the air. So it reminds me of like playing brass and vibration and resonance. Um, main waves of earthquakes, ultrasound, and vibrations like a spring or a slinky, for example. But if you get into different kinds of vibrations, there's supposed to be three main kinds: free versus natural vibration, forced vibration, and damped vibration. So, in a nutshell, I think, especially if you're thinking about brass playing, resonance, even for singing or talking, for maximum resonance and sound production, you want free natural vibrations, which there's no hindrance on them. You just want to let them resonate. So I think you can apply that probably to your life a little bit as well. Like kind of put things in motion, but kind of let them happen. Don't try to add any stress or anything that will constrict the natural vibration and frequency. So yeah, that's a lot of information.
Wow, man, that's thank you, bro. That's like real deep stuff, and it's great for us to think about as well. Like, and I like bringing the connections, and I like thinking about how these things are connected, and I like the thing you quickly mentioned about the string and how you talked about different type of waves they are, and I wanted to maybe talk a little bit about that because I remember was it Michal Kaku? Is he one of those people?
Maybe. I don't know.
But if anything, like in terms of the strings, is that can we connect that to? I mean, obviously, like an instrument, but like say for instance, string instruments and the way they resonate and the way that makes us feel compared to like a brass instrument compared to anything else. I wonder what's that type of effect and
Yeah, yeah. So have you ever seen that video on how like literally talking like positive thoughts or whatever to like water or a plant changes the molecules within it? I think they call that whole field like cymatics.
mm,
And it kind of got me thinking about how everything's kind of interconnected and we affect each other in terms of our energy, positive versus negative. Here, if you think about vibrations, you got the damped kind of vibration where you kind of hinder some of the vibration. What's the other kind that I had on here on my notes? Oh yeah, the force vibration is where you force it, I guess. But yeah, it's just I guess not forcing anything. But I think we need each other. We need all this music, all the vibrations, cosmic events like supernovas and explosions and all this stuff in the universe emit energy and vibrations. So we're all kind of just like affecting each other, like always. It's like, would you feel better, like us talking, for example, on Zoom or on phone, or would you feel better if we're like hanging out and talking in person and we can really, literally, physically connect with vibrations?
mm,
It gets into like the whole social thing and the necessity to be social for just general well-being and health, mental health, physical health, everything. So, and then when it related to like instruments, like if somebody has like a certain sound that speaks to you, often it's usually a very resonant sound. And I remember Branford talking about this in an interview where he was talking about you can have all the vocabulary you want in jazz, for example, but if you don't have the sound, you're not going to be able to connect with people. If you don't have the sound, so you can have all the data you want, but if you're not literally vibrating and connecting and resonating with people, it's almost not going to get across. So it has to like feel good. So it's sounded to me is really like feeling good, making someone else feel good, just bettering everything. Uh, Even in a way soulful, like in a weird scientific way. A really resonant sound is soulful because it connects to other people. So yeah, those are some thoughts I guess about that.
wow, wow, man. I'm creating a connection here. It seems like our goal when we play these instruments is to be resonant. Is to like is to just align ourselves with the. I guess the resonance is perhaps maybe the thing that's the commonality within all of us, perhaps, or it's the thing that trying to make a connection in terms of like it seems to me when you explain it that way, it seems to me like even when we're playing as brass players, we know that like if we force something out, it's not going to be as it's not going to be as clear and sound if we what I mean if we try to dampen what we're doing, if we try to restrict the air, it's not going to come out in the way it's not going to come out in a way that's truly pure and to the core of the instrument compared to if we go through the middle point, which is like what I like to call the center of the sound. And that seems to me like similar to what you'd say in terms of the resonance. And man, that's really deep to think about.
Yeah, you can
Because
apply it in a lot of different places. Yeah.
it seems to me as in like it kind of reflects us as human beings because like how we approach every situation, if we deal with it without dampening or forcing it, then we're closer to actually dealing with most of our life situations in a resonant way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember yeah. Were you gonna say a couple more things?
No, I just wanted you to expand on that a little.
So I remember there's a couple things that just popped in my mind with that. remember one thing was Winton was talking about what soulful meant to him. He said, "Soulful, man, it's like the feeling like Pops or like Louis Armstrong or Celia Cruz, the feeling they have when basically when other people are around them, they feel better. So if they're having a bad day and you hear them play trumpet, you talk to them, interact with them, what in whatever way. If you're having a bad day and you interact with these people somehow, you're gonna you're gonna be okay. If you're having a pretty good day and you interact with these people, you're gonna be feeling great. They just elevate everything around you. I don't know how exactly it works, but and like on the other side of the spectrum, if you listen to certain people, you know, different sounds affect us in different ways. So we all have our favorite sounds, favorite artists, favorite whatever. So like for example, I like Billie Holiday. Her sound resonates with me. It's almost like she doesn't even have to say sad words, but you can feel some of the pain she went through. Even Louis Armstrong, man, I can hear that in the sound. Like it's I like those kinds of sounds that are just full of experience and life and richness, you know, and it's full spectrum, not just happy all the time or sad, just has everything in there. So I don't know. To me, that's like it's a little riff I went on with what you said regarding sound and people and yeah.
It makes me simply think of the phrase that we like to use a lot: "good vibes."
Yeah, yeah,
You
right.
know, it's interesting to
Yeah,
think. Interesting to think because, and that's what when people say like when we play as musicians and artists, that is a reflection of who we are. When you hear people talk about that as well, and it really makes sense to think that, yeah, you're naturally you're going to be reflective, or you're going to approach everything you do in reflection to how you approach things, in your consciousness as a being. And so you can imagine, yeah, if you are someone that does treat life in a certain way, you're going to treat your instrument in a certain way as well. You know, and I'm getting another idea from what you're saying in terms of life experience and how that affects your sound.
yep.
How does that make you feel, and what does that make you think of?
I don't know. It's like, have you heard any like the really? Would imagine you have over in New York, but any of like the old jazz musicians? Like I heard Benny Golson play years ago, and my brother and I were just like, dang man. Like for me, that's what I want in jazz and trombone. I just want to have the sound of jazz in my sound when I play trombone. As soon as I start playing, that's jazz. Doesn't have to be any crazy, whatever jazz stuff, licks, virtuosic. But I want that in my sound. I think part of that only comes with time, playing over time as well. So it keeps developing, getting richer and richer. Even though you might not be physically like capable, you might be more fragile in your 60s, 70s. You're gonna have that sound, man. And yeah, as I'm, start to get older, 30s now, mid 30s, I start to think about connecting with people and resonating with them. And sometimes it doesn't work. Like certain, like I think about magnets, how they push each other away, or certain sounds, like for example, like a minor second or a minor ninth, are really what do you call it? Not disjunct. What's the word I'm thinking of? Consonant, dissonant. They're very dissonant, and that's okay. Maybe you're not meant for that relationship, for that connection with this horn player you're into, this whatever it is. And yeah, that's where I'm going towards. Just trying to learn about myself by learning about other people, reading up, learning information, and just sharing it with each other. Just always try to be as everything as I can. So I'm here doing this thing. I'm just like, why did I comment on your thing? I know you from your trumpet playing. You got a good sound.
Oh,
I
thank
know
you,
you
man.
can play. Um, you studied in New York, and I think early on there was a couple of videos I think I remember seeing of you playing. Maybe Wendell was talking about you sending him some videos of you playing some solos or transcriptions or something when you were younger. So, but yeah, it's just I'm here right now talking to you. It's like, who's this guy? Peter Tijerina. He's in the Midwest over there. So,
Meant to,
yes,
it's meant to be. Now I'm loving the direction that we're taking with this conversation because I'm actually putting a lot of dots together as we talk because I'm thinking now, everything you say, I'm creating some connection with how it relates in terms of vibration and how you just talk about consonants and consonants and
Right.
in terms of when we play one note, that's vibrating a certain way, and then we play another note, and depending on the way that note is vibrating, then that creates a level of consonance or dissonance. And
Yeah.
maybe similar to how when we're in a life situation, when we meet someone for the first time, we're vibrating in a certain frequency, and this other
Right.
person vibrating in a certain frequency, and depending on the connection between the two, that creates some level of dissonance or consonance. It's like it's interesting to think how we can create these these relations, to life, and that's
Yeah.
why I say music is life, man. I think we're taking it to we're trying to break it down here.
Right. 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 And it's like, why are we getting this deep into it? We don't have to. Just if you like to think, there's just one direction you can take your thoughts to toward. It doesn't have to be this. It could be literature. It could be like, what do you call it? Visual art. It could be whatever. Philosophy, which is all. It's all kind of related too. So
Mm.
yeah, you can take it different directions. But yeah, if you ever like want to run a business, for example, you're gonna have to connect with people. You're gonna have to keep a balanced life. I mean, as you start getting older, like I'm the kind of person that's like, go, 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 sprinter. Then you start getting burned out really fast, and the stress is like, oh, careful with the stress. It'll get you. It'll get you. I felt the stress get me a little bit in my 30s. I mean, even in my 20s, man. So you do have to balance things. You can apply that to every area of your life: the music side, the career side, family life, social life, eating well, exercise. If one of those things suffers, I like the way Neil deGrasse Tyson put it. If any of those one things suffer, then everything suffers. Like, let's say your sleep suffers, you're going to be in bad shape, bad health. Your memory's going to go to crap, basically. Your playing's going to go, your career, your life. So anything, the spiritual side of things too, whatever that is for you, however you think about that. So, yes, balance. We're all kind of part of one big thing, and how we end up realizing that, discovering it every day.
Mm. Man, that's beautiful, brother. Beautiful, man. This is like our first time meeting each other, technically. For this is crazy, and I guess that's the beauty of technology, but man, I'm really loving the conversation, and I'm someone that I used to watch a lot of physics documentaries, and
Mm.
yeah, and so I guess in terms of these type of conversations, like I'm always, I can't get enough kind of thing,
Right, right.
Uh, and if anything, I'm just going on a thing here, but because later on, I want people to ask questions, and I also want you to also talk about your music, and we can just kind of you know just kind of take out, I guess, go away from just this whole deep talk. But in terms of what you said earlier, in terms of how I want to go back there, in terms of the different dimensions, do you have any familiarity with, like, say for instance, if we go chronologically, say for instance we're in the third, we go, we figured out a little bit about the fourth. Say for instance we would just go to the fifth dimension. Is there any like way to really like give us a sense of what that looks like?
I think there is. Past the fourth, I haven't studied much. I think I briefly read about it, but what my friend was telling me is like, okay, so you've reached the limit of that dimension once you go in a direction that lower dimensions cannot accommodate. So, for example, if you're in the second dimension, once you've like kind of you're starting to go a new direction. There's new possibilities opening up that dimension cannot handle. That's when you create a new dimension. And as you start to get higher, I think like the fifth and beyond, it's just like basically different possible outcomes start to happen. I don't know how, because it's pretty concrete with like all the dimensions. The fourth, it's time. With the fifth, it's I don't know. It's kind of like, I believe, folded into each other. I could be confusing this with string theory, but and wormholes.
Mm.
But it just starts to get exponentially like unimaginable. I think the only way to even imagine this is to see the mathematics, some of the theories about it, or talk to somebody who's like a specialist and can like put it in layman's terms, which I cannot. But yeah, it's like what exists in those higher dimensions. As far as I know, the only thing I know is that just like exponentially more possibilities and directions until there's no more directions and possibilities to go into. It's probably like the 10th, at the 11th, they all come back to one single point. That's as far as I know.
So I guess if I'm trying to make a connection in the musical sense, I mean, bear with me here. I'm thinking like if I were to play over, over All Things You Are, right? And I play one version of a solo. That's me influencing the fourth dimension, right? And so by the end of my solo, the fourth dimension would basically already be able to perceive the whole solo in one instance,
I
right?
mean, we're already in it. We're in a fourth dimension, and we're probably in other dimensions. But which exact like possibility is going to happen and play out? I know people have said like there's no such thing as choice. Like it's going to happen a certain way, and like intellectual people too. So I always want to see if I can at some point talk to them or something, see why they think this after they have a really solid reason for thinking that way. But yeah, in some ways, it's already happened. It's already that's it. But I think one way to apply all the different possibilities, is just choose one and be okay with it. Like, do what you want to do. As you start getting older, you might have responsibilities. I have a few years ago, little toddler.
Oh,
It
nice, nice.
changed the way I can't practice as much. I can't do certain things. The degree's taking longer. It's happened during the doctorates. I met someone and everything went well, etc. So, but yeah, that's just one. It's like, okay, it's like, how do you do this? What's going to happen? I don't know, but I've been okay with thinking about the long game and
Mm.
making these like little decisions now that maybe eventually will like grow and grow into and be manifested into something I want to achieve in my life. So if you can start from the end, start from the fourth dimension, and pick those long-term goals that you want, then that should really make things easy for you in terms of what to do, goals, etc. I know for a lot of people, it's hard to start. You're like, man, it's just too much. I wish I would have started playing earlier. I wish I would have had these lessons earlier. I wish I would have, had more money. I wish I had, whatever it was. So just start doing what you can. That's your special thing. There's no one else that's gonna live that experience. So that's how I
Wow.
see it sometimes.
Because
But
literally, I was just thinking that perhaps like All Things You Are, whatever I could have possibly played in that one chorus,
mhm.
like every other version of what I could have
Yeah,
possibly played would basically be something I might be able to experience in the high dimension. That's like I'm trying to rack my brain. That's one of the things I'm thinking of. Like perhaps like in that one chorus, all the possible decisions I could have possibly made would all be represented, and I could have like I could be like, oh man, like that's crazy. Like I could have played that solo like in all these different ways, and I can see. I guess I can basically see all of it for one thing. It's insane, man. I guess you can. I guess then at that point you're like, well, the beauty of this dimension is the fact that we get to choose, and, and the fact that through choosing that, that's the one that like a solo that's memorable to us and a solo that we love, like a Louis Armstrong solo or a Clifford Brown solo. You think, oh man, like that's the beauty of this dimension. The fact that we get to have a certain layout in terms of
right.
what there is. And there, like, how when there's so many options to choose from, like, you then just get confused and like you're just like, like,
Yep.
which one is the best? Like, but the fact that there is only one and that one is the one that's memorable to us makes it a little bit of a meaningful thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So probably one short answer could be, I mean, if you're wondering if you're doing the right thing or not, you're doing it. You're already doing it, even if you think it's a bad decision or whatever that is. Wrong, no choice. You played the wrong chord that was down a half step, or I don't know. I did that recently on it was like
Uh-huh.
an E flat seven chord, and I was gonna do like a like G, B flat, D flat, F, and I ended up playing like an A minor over that, and so I
Mm.
stopped for like a measure. Dang it, because like I was flowing, and then I was like going back. I was like, well, that would have been like some kind of tritone sub sort of thing. So it would
Yeah.
have. It was just like go with it, man. It's like you're
Mm.
doing it, just keep doing it. Think about the long game too, and then if you want to like really straighten out your path. So for me, as much as I love jazz and trombone, and I want to like develop the best of my life, I want family more than anything else.
Mm.
And D, that's why I'm doing doctorates. So I was studying with Mike Dees for a couple of years there. He was telling me, man, what do you want to do with your life? What's the number one thing you want more than anything? I was like, probably family, man. Even though I'm doing this, maybe you should get a doctorate, get a job one day, teaching, and so he helped me realize that, and from that, of course, you start applying that to different things. So yeah,
Mm.
just talk to the people who are doing what you want to do. I think Ulysses Owens. I was talking to him a little bit too, and he's like a career kind of life mentor coach. He, same thing. Write down what are the things you want to do in your life. Literally write them down. Okay, what's stopping you from doing them? Okay, okay? How can you connect with other people to make these things happen? And that's as far as I got tonight. My life's a little busy right now. Couple jobs, music stuff, school, family. So, but yeah, I'd say that's should be helpful.
Brother, man, I
People.
just want, man, for first time we're having this conversation. That was super, super like helpful and like super deep. And thank you for responding to my message and being a part of this, man. This is beautiful, man. And I hope for us to have many more of this type of conversations.
Yeah, man, this is a great thing you're doing. So I'm proud you're doing it. You're, getting this out there too to people. So instead of being in our own, which is we are in our own, but it's people better.
Absolutely. Oh man, so you have any music and we can find and out there somehow, and whatever website you can let everybody know. Um,
Yeah. So I don't know if it shows my name spelling on Discord. You can just look up myname.com. Or if you're like on Instagram or maybe even TikTok, YouTube, just look up Jazz Bone PT. So my initials PT, Peter Tijerina. So Jazz Bone PT on Instagram. I think TikTok, same thing. I know they have handles now on YouTube, so same thing. Facebook, even if you're on there, older school, same thing there. It's like facebook.com/jazzbone or something like that. So yeah, so there's
Amazing.
just stuff out there. I try to put stuff out there just originally just for my own development and just to track my progress over time. But then it's like, hey, you find out you connect with people. That's where a lot of people are at. So
Mm,
it's cool.
that's right. I did see you have like those instructional videos as well.
Oh yeah, I just like
Yeah.
to share stuff every now and then. It's good for teaching too. If at a certain point y'all should end up teaching to kind of pass the baton on to the other people.
Mm.
And, it really solidifies your concepts. That's for sure. But yeah, man, Giveton, thanks for having me. It was random. It's like, all right, Giveton's like having me. Really,
Thank you so much, bro. I appreciate you, man. So
Thank
I
you.
think that concludes our talk, and to many more, to many more.
All right, yes, sir.
All right, brother.
Until next time, see ya.
Sure.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that will be the conclusion of that interview. Fantastic time with Giveton Gelin, with special guest Peter Tijerina. Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned in just another hour at 5 p.m. 5 p.m. We've got Giveton again with pianist Matisse Pickard. Interview Q&A. That's going to be lots of fun as well. Anyways, thank you guys for listening at intheshed.live. Make sure to join our Discord. I'll put up the code right there. You can scan that QR code and get a free invite to our intheshed.live Discord, where we host all of these interviews and events live, and you guys can be first in line to participate. But anyhow, tune again at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the interview and Q&A curated by Giveton Gelin with our special guest, Matisse Pickard on the piano. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you then.